thank you again to Ernie for taking some time on a Friday morning here to chat with us.
Happy to be here. Hey, Morgan, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Well, I'm super excited to be kicking this session off today. You've had such an impressive career, ranging from some of the most notable music videos of the last couple decades to some really smash successful shows at Sundance as well. So I'd love to kick things off. Tell me a little bit about your journey, about how you got into editing. Where did you start? Did you always want to make movies? I always love to start with this question.
Yeah, it's funny, and I'll preface it by saying I don't love talking about myself, but I always like hearing other people's journey, so I'll share mine. And basically, in high school, I had this whole plan of like going to law school, becoming a politician. I did like Harvard Model Congress and moot court and like all these things. And then I discovered filmmaking. I discovered back then it was like Final Cut 3. I'm very old. And mini DV cameras, which are now back in vogue and kind of popular. And I fell in love with being able to shoot things and edit things and kind of play in that space. And one thing kind of led to another. I was able to, in college, tour with some bands, doing kind of documentary, early YouTube, Warped Tour stuff. I was able to film with some live concerts. And it was through those things that I really just discovered like how editing was so important to the process of filmmaking, and how I was able to I could go gather all these clips and be in the van sleeping in a Walmart parking lot with a band, but then laptop hard drive in my lap, edit something together that we could then post to the early days of YouTube, get a reaction, get the word out about the band's music. It was just really fun and exciting. And so that led me to move to Los Angeles back in 2012, where I worked as a night assistant editor in reality television, which is, incredibly, it's like being in a factory, 6 p.m. to 4 a.m. You show up, you organize footage for the editors, you get exports done, QCs, kind of all the tedious, boring things. But that was enough of a start to be able to, have a salary and get into Los Angeles, into the community here. And I was lucky to find kind of I think a lot of people in our industry, you get to this place where you kind of, it's almost like being in high school or college, where it's like you find your class, you find, okay, these are the editors working around me, these are assistant editors working around me, these are the directors and the writers and actors. And as you grow and learn, your peer group kind of does as well. And so that was my experience, is I was able to kind of work my way up through the ranks as an assistant editor in comedy television, doing shows like Atlanta and Baskets and Barry. And it was through those processes that I met a lot of post producers and directors and other editors, and was able to kind of, find my community and find my team and find those people that would give me an opportunity, and I would give them an opportunity, and we all kind of grew together. And then one thing led to another. I was able to cut some music videos, was able to move into transition into some commercial editing, and now most recently features and more long form stuff.
Oh, that's awesome. That's and the switch from politics over into the team sport of production is an interesting turn. I think we always talk about how this process of making movies and production in general is a team sport. And we know that like team dynamics are super important, and finding your people is in itself a journey. Tell me a little bit more about that, how you like to work, and how you envision the role of editor collaborating with directors and producers and others.
Yeah, I think there's a real camaraderie that comes out of the type of work that we do. When you're on set, it's 12-hour, 14-hour, 16-hour days. You're running around, you're kind of losing your mind in a way, but it's very physical, it's very active. With editorial, with post, it's just as demanding, but it's so much longer in duration. If a TV show like Atlanta would shoot for 4 or 5, 6 weeks, we would be in post for 6 or 7 or 8 months. And so it's really a marathon of kind of structuring your team, working with people, being nice, being comfortable with like long hours in a often dark room, unfortunately. But yeah, for me, what I've really loved about my career and the opportunities I've gotten, and just the connections that I've made over the years, is I feel like I've been lucky to work with nice people most of the time, and people who really care about the thing that they're making, which is unfortunately not always the case. But when that happens, when you have that like awesome synergy of people who care, people who are nice and supportive and uplifting and empowering of one another, I think you make really cool things. And so, I learned early on, kind of in the assistant editor route, doing the first comedy show I did was Comedy Bang Bang on IFC. And then it was Atlanta for FX and Baskets for FX. And on those shows, a big part of it was I was the assistant editor, which is a job I didn't even know existed before I moved to LA. And just to fill everybody in on kind of what that means is, as an assistant editor, you organize the footage from set. Sometimes you have to transcode it, make dailies from the raw camera media into a, maybe a ProRes LT, ProRes proxy, depending on what your workflow is. And you organize that footage, you bring it into the system, you prep multicams, which aren't always for like live events or multiple camera situations. A lot of film and TV is shot with more than one camera. And so what you want to do is, you sync your footage, the audio and the video. If it's multicam, multiple cameras, you sync that. And you hand that off to your editor. And then I think the best assistant editor relationships are built in kind of a creative collaboration and a trust with one another, where you are watching the footage. You might be giving your editor notes. You might be helping out with an assembly. You might be doing some sound design. And all of those things help the finished product be more explored, be more litigated, be more, you got to try a lot of options in editorial. I'm very sorry if you guys can hear this trash truck outside. It is very loud. But yeah, so to me, building a team, being a part of a team, it just all comes from that place of being willing to take initiative, willing to, play and try and have a positive attitude. I think a joke I make is that as an editor and as an assistant editor or anybody else in our industry, you kind of have to have a bedside manner. You have to be able to kind of read the room and say, okay, my director and producer today, they really need a cheerleader or they need a therapist, or they need a tactician who's going to come in and, say this is what it needs, or this is how we solve this problem. But what I love the most about the job is just the constant problem solving. It's how do we get creative with this footage? How do we get creative with this workflow? How do we find a way into this thing that maybe wasn't there on the page, maybe wasn't there in the footage initially, but now that we're kind of playing and we're trying things, we have the opportunity to do that, what they call, that third rewrite, basically. You write the film, you direct the film, and then you edit the film. And so, yeah, I think the biggest thing to answer your question is that, be nice to people, take initiative, and I think you'll go really far. I think that's the way to build a good team.
There's so many folks in the chat talking about, just getting started and networking. And I think, the one thing that a lot of folks that join our webinars here, a lot of editors that we talk with before in the past talk about, some of the teams that they've been a part of that have really fostered some of their best work. So much of this is dependent on, your ability of giving the right feedback at the right time. Bedside manner is very important. Some days you're a therapist, as you just said. What are some of the best team dynamics that you feel have brought out the best in your work? I know you've had such a impressive career and worked on such widely different projects. Do you feel like there's a specific type of team dynamic that works best for the way you like to work? What's the most fun team dynamic that you've encountered over the course of your career?
I think it's really simple. You said it there. It's fun. A lot of people take this work very seriously, and it should be. I mean, like, I don't know if anybody's watching The Studio right now, but there was an episode recently where the main character, who is a studio head, is like talking to a bunch of doctors, and he's like, my work is very important. They're like, come on, you make movies, we save people's lives. So it's easy to get into the pressure cooker sometimes, if you're up against air. I've worked on some music projects where, like, literally, we have to get the edit done because it's got to get posted that night. And it's really easy to kind of fall into that pressure cooker, to lose your head, to get angry, to get frustrated, whatever it is. And I think it's just reminding ourselves that like fun, like this work should be fun. Yes, it's going to be long. Yes, it's going to be tiring. Yes, it's going to push your buttons sometimes and get political in dumb ways. And you might not win every fight. You know, your job as an editor is often to help supplement or help empower or help, you know, someone else see their vision come to life. But I think, yeah, it's finding that fun in it. You know, on Opus, the movie you guys just saw the trailer for, my assistant editor, my director, and I, like, we literally made a game out of throwing empty water bottles into the recycling can. And my assistant editor came in one day. He had worked late one night on like a 14-page official rule book. You know, like you have to find like the little things. I think a lot of what's fun about long form editing is you get to a point where I'm laughing at things in scene that nobody would ever laugh at. They would think I'm insane. But it's just because I've watched it so many times. There's a look or a blink or a way a character says something that just tickles me in the right way. So yeah, I think it's finding that fun. I think a big thing that I always go back to, my favorite assistant editors ever worked with, and something I really took pride in myself when I was an assistant editor. And I think it's valuable as a PA, as an AE, any role, is just being able to take initiative. You know, we live in the day of Google, and I don't know if anybody uses Bing, but, you know, we live in the day of there's so much information. You know, when I was in college, 20 years ago, oh no, when I was in college, you know, you couldn't just search on YouTube for like, how do I, you know, fix my audio output on this, or how do I look at the color, you know, whatever. Like, there wasn't this resource, but now there's so many people out there making videos, short videos, long videos, describing all of these things. It's kind of not acceptable to be like, well, I don't know, I'm gonna throw my hands up and not do anything. You kind of have to take that initiative and be willing to learn something new, willing to try something new. And that's ultimately, I think, what makes the most valuable team player in our work is the people who see a problem and get excited at like, how can I solve it? And not those that kind of throw up their hands and say, all right, somebody else figure it out for me. And then, yeah, just that having fun, being, you know, just being nice to people. It's like, nobody wants to be in a dark room for 12 hours a day for the rest of their life. So yeah, go in and have fun.
But if there's a 14-page rule book on a water bottle game, I don't know, that could make it
Oh yeah, I mean, that's different.
was.
That's where it gets real serious and complicated.
Before we dive into some of the demos, one of the most popular topics we always have on these webinars is, how do you even begin to navigate the festival circuit? I mean, some of the best projects that we're seeing up for award season generally come out of these big festivals like Sundance. So what advice would you have on somebody that is just starting to dip their toe in navigating this space? What's different about navigating the festival circuit versus how you navigate and approach some of the other work that you do?
Well, I will say, as you know, Team Opus, I was very lucky that we had an awesome studio, an awesome producing team, an awesome director. Like, there's a lot of resources there to help kind of, you know, open those doors, push for things. You know, outside of that, I've submitted to a couple festivals. You know, I've got some projects of my own that I've worked on. I think the biggest thing is just, man, therapy talk. So the way I like to put it is, or the way that helps me is just making sure the metrics that we use to determine our success are metrics that we can control. Because there's a lot that goes on in festivals that you can't control. You can't control who else submitted that year. You can't control what's going on in the news. You know, festivals often want to program things based on zeitgeisty topics or ideas. You know, they are getting thousands upon thousands of submissions, and you know, sometimes you win and sometimes you don't. And ultimately, if your metric is, in order to feel good about myself or my project, I have to get into Sundance, that's not a metric you can control. And so what's going to happen is your feelings about your project, about your work, about your worth are defined by something outside of your control. And thus you're susceptible to, I didn't get in. I didn't get in. What does it mean? How does it work? And then it's easy, and I've done it. I'm guilty of it. It's easy to go down that rabbit hole of then like, well, let me watch everybody who got in, and I'm going to analyze what they did, and I'm going to figure out my shortcomings. And I think ultimately that's just not the right way to look at it. I don't think anybody's project has, there's definitely shortcomings. Maybe your audio was fuzzy because, there was an airplane overhead and you couldn't get it out. But I think at the end of the day, the metric should be like, did I finish it? Did I submit to the festival? Did I make something that I'm proud of? Did I do something that scared me? Did I, improve on a thing in this project that maybe I messed up on the first project? And it's by doing that, by reorienting the metric, I think we can just live more like creatively fulfilled lives, and it'll be less dependent on what other people want. And I can use just as an example in my own life, my own career. This industry doesn't make sense, and it's not fair. And I think there's a lot of initiatives being done. I think there's a lot of work being done to make things more fair. My buddy Carlos Lopez Estrada, who's a director and producer, he did a film Dee recently. He's got a company called Anti-Gravity Academy, and they do panels like once a month, kind of introducing and opening doors, revealing transparency in the industry that I think is helping make things more fair and more open. But it's not fair. And going back to the anecdote about my own life, like I cut This Is America, the Childish Gambino music video. That music video has 7 edits in it, which is, for a music video, not a lot, especially modern music videos are very cutty. But that music video opened so many doors for me career-wise that so many music videos I did prior to it didn't. I'm not trying to name drop or brag, but I did a bunch of music videos for big artists that did not, get me commercial reps, did not get me an opportunity to move into narrative editing, that did not open the doors that I thought they might. But then I do this one video that goes viral and, wins a Grammy and wins, all these awards, and that opened the doors. And so to me, that anecdote, what that means and what that represents is that it's not fair. It's kind of a lottery at times. And so the only thing you can do, to quote Jake Gyllenhaal in Nightcrawler, who's not a great character, but I'll do it anyway. In order to win a lottery ticket, you got to have money to buy a ticket. And I think, for me, it's by changing the metrics of what we say our success is, we can feel better about our work, and then we can just make things and grow and get better. And I think if you do that, it's a lottery. But you're raising the money to buy the tickets, and eventually it'll break. Eventually you will find the thing that you get to do. You're This Is America, that opens the doors, that allows you to grow in your career. I don't think I would have gotten that opportunity had I not done, all the random music videos for $500 or $200 or whatever the 10 years prior. And so, yeah, that I think is ultimately the takeaway. I forget what the original question was, Morgan.
No, you nailed it. I think that's perfect. And it's actually kind of a perfect segue into us diving a little bit more into this edit, because since you've had this really rich background in all of these high profile music videos, you can really see where a lot of your strengths start to shine into some of this long form narrative project, because there are multiple scenes in this that are very music video-esque, that make it very unique. And given the fact that, this project Opus is about this mysterious artist, I think this like perfectly teed up, you to come in and absolutely dominate this edit. So with that, I'd love to dive into some of our screen share portion of this.
Yeah.
And we usually like to start at the top here with like organization techniques, because when you're working on long form projects like this, there's tons and tons of days of dailies, and it can be overwhelming, especially for some of the newer users, to Premiere, to even like start to think about how we're going to set up our project and start organizing. So let's start there. How do you like to organize your footage and assets? We know everybody likes to work slightly differently, but we'd love to see your process.
Yeah. So first off, thank goodness we're here in 2025 and we have productions to work in for long form content. So Opus was set up in Adobe Productions, which is part of Premiere. And basically what that allowed us to do is we had a shared network attached storage device. I forget the brand name of it. I won't get that nerdy. But yeah, we had storage, so my assistant editor and I could both access the same media. We were shooting in New Mexico and Santa Fe and Albuquerque on I'll nerd out here for a second, Sony Venice 2 in 8K, Sony X OCN, I think it was ST, big, massive files. We had a dailies house who would apply the DP's LUT and create us offline media. And what that means is, a lot of people, maybe this is an old school thing, but back in the day, you would never really edit your raw footage. Computers weren't fast enough. And so today, my preference, and I think is actually a good best practice, is to still maintain an offline workflow. And so what that means is taking the camera master footage, transcoding it into something a little bit smaller, a little bit lighter. And so for us, it was ProRes LT. We kept the camera's native aspect ratio and then just made all our dailies the width of 1920, which is the standard HD resolution. And what that let us do is have all of the media that we would need to edit basically could live in about 3.5 terabytes, which, we have SSDs now that are 4 terabytes that are this big. And that meant that, if I needed to go somewhere else, if I needed to have my laptop, say, on set for a pickup shoot or something, I could have the entire project with me. If it was the actual master media, the 8K, 8.6K Venice footage, there's no way I would need to carry a backpack with a RAID. And so, yeah, so we get those transcodes. The dailies house makes that for us because they're on location. They can do it quickly. They would send it to us, I believe, via Aspera. But Riley, my assistant editor, handled that. That's part of the job of the assistant editor, is getting the footage into the edit bay. And his first step, I don't have his project with me. We're looking at kind of my edit project here. But his first step would be to take the footage, go through clip by clip, look at the slates, compare the number of clips he received with what the camera report said, make sure that there was no missing files, everything looked like it was transcoded properly, no transcode hits, no issues. He would then rename the clips to match the slates and give them a camera designation, which you can actually kind of see here if I zoom in a little bit. So these are some multicams. This is scene 22. And so in the multicam, I hope you can see this, it says 22 T2_A. So that's just him saying this is scene 22, take 2 from A camera. And then we also have a B camera option here. And he will sync those, prep those in a project. Because we're in productions, project files all live within a production. And so he would have a project file per day. And that would allow him to kind of isolate the multicams, isolate the media, and have it be in a place where, let's say hypothetically, and this actually happened on our show, we had a couple days where the dailies house did not apply the right LUT. And so he needed to go in and recreate some things. We needed to retranscode the footage so that the LUT was correct. He could then go into his day project, go into those multicams, add in the updated, correct transcoded files, and then all of that stuff repopulates into my edit files and everywhere else. We don't have to overcut anything. The multicam is really just this nice kind of thing. I love it so much. I even use it for non-multiple camera syncing. Did I say that in a way that makes sense? Basically, like, even if it's single cam, I still like to make a multicam of my video with my production audio. It just allows you to always have this thing you can step into. You can add a Lumetri color panel if you wanted to do like a master look across every time that multicam is cut in somewhere. You could apply it to the clip within the multicam. And then from there, he would bring, the clips into, I like to work, and everybody's different. But what I like to work with are string outs per scene and a couple other things, but we'll start with that. So if you look over here on the left, we have a string outs bin. And so Riley would have to go in. Basically, it's not guaranteed that all of scene 33, hypothetically, or scene 22 or whatever. I'm actually going to start in reel 3. So let me come over here, string outs to scene 22. So not every bit of scene 22 is necessarily shot on a single day, but generally it is on lower budget things. So in scene 22, we've got the string out that Riley made for me. And I'll just zoom out here. I'm going to move my little video box. All right. So what you can see here, let me tidy this up a little bit. Part of being an editor, I think, is being organized, especially an assistant editor. It's just helpful to have things where you know where they are, and anything that can remove resistance to accessing your footage, I think is helpful in the long run. Because you think like, okay, on Opus, we cut for, I think, 9 or 10 months in total. And so if you're doing something every single day and you can save yourself 10 seconds, 3 times here, 5 times there, it adds up and it gets days of your life back. So always start very organized, obviously, if you can. And so, yeah, so this is scene 22. This is the string out Riley would make for me. And so what this consists of is every take from scene 22 that we shot. We shot, we delivered the film in a 2.39 to 1 aspect ratio, which is pretty standard. You can see it here. I'll make it big. But we shot in 16:9 or 17:9. 16:9. And so what that allows us to do is I can have a 16:9 timeline. I can throw a matte, which is just the black bars over top. And then what that allows us to do is, it gives us a little bit of what they call look around area. I can go to my effects panel. I can, John's, let's give him a little more headroom. It just gives us some flexibility to have more image there. Also for our VFX artists, it gives them more points to track. It's just a nice little safety net. Okay, so string out. We got take 22, take 1 and 2. And what this is just, these are the different setups. Traditionally, with slates, with file naming, when you change a setup, you add a letter. So we go from 22 to 22A to 22B to 22C and all the way up. Each of these have multiple cameras. So, take 1A, take 1B. And so what I can look at now is I can very quickly, we're cutting as they're filming. A big part of editing, especially on a feature like this, is you want to be cutting as they go so that you can give direct feedback to the producers, to the director. Maybe they need to tack on a pickup at the end of the shoot. Maybe we didn't get an insert of somebody's hand. Excuse me while I drink some water. So yeah, so I get a string out. I then can watch this down. I can get a sense of like, okay, I've got a wide, I've got a couple closes, different varying sizes. I can look at it and I can say, okay, I've got about 46 minutes worth of footage. I can look at my script and I can say, okay, this scene is so many pages long. It just helps me kind of understand what I have access to. Editorial, I think a big thing as an editor is you're constantly in this battle of like performance versus continuity or geography, right? It's like, what's the best performance moment from this character, from this actor for this line? Or what's the best place the camera would be to tell the story? Sometimes you want to be close because you want to obscure what's in the background, or you want to be wide to establish a scene or establish somebody's grand entrance or whatever it is. So it's nice to have stuff like this. Just helps me get an overview. But really where the meat of the work starts for me is called line by lines. And so what that is, Riley, my assistant editor on Opus, who's awesome, made all of these for me. And what this is if you notice, first off, the colors match. So if we go back to scene 22, see how these are purple and then blue and then green, or whatever the premiere label is. Violet. Basically, this allows me to now see in a line by line, okay, that's those first two kind of wide takes, right? And then this was the 22A and this was the 22B. And what Riley has done here is cut up every single line by setup for the entire scene. And so you can actually scroll through here and see all these markers at the top. Each of those markers represents a different line from the script. And there's no crazy magic to it. It's just literally, what's the first line in that scene on the script page? What's the second line? And he types that into the markers here for me. So if I look here, I can say, okay, Moretti walks up to the dais. Dais? Is that how you say that?
Yeah.
For years I've thought about the first thing I'd say to everybody as I approached you all in this very room. And basically what this lets me do is very quickly, I can watch down this scene. If you actually if we go to my selects bin, I can now line by line go through and pick out what my favorite read is of each line. And so this sequence is actually the Ernie and Mark Anthony Green, our director, we went through together and made our selects. And the way I'd like to do that, I will move the selected take up in the video tracks. And so what this lets me do is it gives me kind of a gut reaction to the footage. A lot of editing is you're sitting with things, you're trying things, you're revising things, you're thinking about things. There's a real exploration to it. But there is your gut reaction too. And I think like they talk about multiple choice testing, like first guess, best guess sometimes. There's something about that lizard part of your brain that's reacting to something. And so what I like to do is have those raw reactions. I'll move something up. If I really like it, I'll move it up even higher on the video tracks. And then what this does is, 6 months down the road, 8 months down the road, let's say we've been like really refining a scene, but we just want to do a pass of tightening or sweetening, or we want to do a pass where we find a different type of performance from our character, right? I think a lot of editing for features is having this relationship with the characters. It's almost like you learn who they are through the footage as you cut, and it might change, but there's something nice about being able to go back and be like, what else did I like? For this line here specifically, what is the line? Markers. I looked at the ground and there was a mosquito cut up into 4 tiny pieces, right? So like this was my select initially, but like what was this one? Maybe this one, had something else going on, and it just gives you kind of that legacy, that library, that access to where your brain was at 6 months ago, that I think is really helpful. The other thing that this does really well, and I'll drop one of I really like analogies or metaphors. But so much of editing for me personally it's more like clay and making pottery than it is building with Legos. Some editors are very like, give me a red brick 2x3, and then I need a blue one. And that's how they put things together. That's how they bring things. For me, I want, if let's say Opus is a bowl that we're making, a pottery, a bowl for some ramen or some cereal. The first thing I need, I don't need the prettiest bowl of all time. I don't need something that could be in the Guggenheim. I need just a functional bowl. And so what the line by line process allows me to do is I can make all my selects per line. I can then very quickly, delete out anything that's on video track 1, go here. I should have a keyboard shortcut for this. Do a little close gap. Oh, class. And now, this is not a super pretty bowl or edit, but it is functional. This will literally be every line, my favorite performance take, back to back assembled. And what that allows me to do then is I can watch that down and I can say, you know what? It would actually be better to be on this person reacting to that person saying their line. Or, you know what? It would be better to be in a wide here. let me go back to my line by lines. And then I can say, okay, cool. These first two are the two wides I have for that moment. Let's try each one of them, or let's try this one because it feels stronger. It allows me to edit with a confidence of, I know going in, and this goes back to that organization I was talking about, Morgan. I can just go in knowing like I am working with my favorite performance takes. And it just makes me feel better about what the edit is, even just at its most raw assembled version. Where other times, if I don't do the line by line process, there's always this constant kind of nagging in the back of your head to say, is this the best read? Is this what I'm actually responding to? Could it be better? And so, yeah, so that's the line by line process.
And as you're going from this early cut phase into a more refined cut, what are some tips and tricks? I mean, aside from assembling all the best takes, and I mean that is really interesting that like almost these characters like evolve like the farther you get into post. But you know, what other strategies would you employ for advice here? You know, how much feedback are you getting throughout this process? What are some of the determining factors around how you make some of these decisions, out of curiosity?
That gets a little bit more nebulous. I think a big part of it, what's the easiest way in? Again, I think it goes back to that performance character thought process, and then the geography continuity thought process. And that's where you really need to like think about, I like to put myself in the seat of an audience member of a movie theater and say, okay, this scene is about a conversation, you know, but what's the conflict of the conversation? What is the goal of the conversation, right? Is somebody coming into the conversation, maybe they have the upper hand at the start, but at the end they concede something? You know, if it's a conversation and somebody's trying to dominate somebody else, or spar mentally, it's thinking about, you know, unique ways to highlight that editorially. I think there's a baseline of just like, we need to see people say what they say when they say it, and we need to understand who's reacting to what is being said or done as it happens. But I think the deeper thing is finding those ways to visually show, because we are a visual medium, what's going on with our characters. You know, what's the deeper meaning behind the moment? Morgan, I don't see you anymore, so I hope I'm not just talking to myself.
Oh no, I'm here.
Okay.
Don't worry.
I was like, oh no. And so, yeah, I think it's, again, going back to the bowl analogy, there's a lot in editing that is play and exploration. I like to say in job interviews with potential directors or producers that I would much rather try something than have a debate about it. I'm very open to talking about ideas, but I don't find any benefit to being like, oh, that'll never work. Because sometimes just trying the thing opens a door you didn't expect. It shows you a way the footage could be connected that may not have made sense at, you know, on face value. And so it's, yeah, just being open to that play and that exploration. One of my favorite parts of the refinement process is when you first start getting your score in from your composers. I find that music always makes everything feel a lot better and sing in a more cohesive way. You know, a lot of times we do temp music in edits to try to pitch to the composers, pitch to the different creative collaborators, like what we think something should sound like or feel like. But yeah, getting that music in always, it helps me, like there's a pace to it or a rhythm, or it inspires, okay, we should really be in a close-up on this because the music's really telling me that we're moving kind of into an internal perspective of this character or whatnot. But yeah, I think a lot of the refinement stuff, a lot of it comes down to taste, you know, which is a thing that I think everybody is born with their own taste and their own aesthetic and their own, you know, kind of natural view into the world. And I think it's important as editors to honor those feelings that we have and to dig into what's specific to us and what we're reacting to. I don't think anybody hires on an editor to come in and tell them what they already know or what they want already. You're kind of a consultant. You're the person who's supposed to have a strong opinion, who's supposed to pitch things, and of course do that tactfully, do that in a way that honors your collaborators and empowers people, makes people feel involved and gets buy-in from them. But yeah, your job, you're a consultant. You're brought in to scrutinize and litigate, and you weren't on set freezing in Albuquerque at 2 a.m. for that shot. So you can be the person to say, hey, it's actually stronger if we don't see that. We don't need it. Where somebody else might be like, oh no, it was so funny on set, we were all laughing. You can be the voice that says, yeah, but it doesn't serve the story, or it doesn't serve this character, or it actually undercuts the joke that happens later. And I think all of that just comes with time. I feel like I'm still figuring out, even after being I looked at my union hours the other day. I've done 17,000 union hours to date. Ooh. Which is, it makes me feel very, very old. But even after all of that, I still go into every project, and I have editor friends who have said the same thing, just being like, why did they hire me? Why am I here? It's a process that you just have to kind of muscle through and be okay with the discomfort of it not being perfect on the first pass. Be okay with the discomfort of like, it's going to take time. And, features are especially that way. When I can cut, I'm doing a commercial right now for my day work. And that's like fun because it's like, okay, it's a 30-second edit. You need a new version, I can have you one in an hour. But with features, it's to watch down your cut is 2 hours. So, okay, I want to review this cut to see how this is playing. Let me wait 2 hours.
Yeah.
You really have to be diligent and focused and just okay, yeah, with that discomfort of the time it's going to take. And I would say if you're dealing with clients who are, putting pressure on you to deliver something faster, that's where communication, I think, is the ultimate tool as an editor. Being able to say, here's where I'm at, here's what's working, here's what's not, here's what I'm still working on, here's what I'm still thinking about. It doesn't make you weak. It allows other people to kind of meet you where you are. And, ultimately I think, yeah, communication is really important.
Yeah. Well, I think it's really easy to get caught up, especially if you were on set, to get attachment to certain lines or certain shots because they were challenging to capture, as you just mentioned. I'd love to dive into some additional scene breakdowns. Are there some scenes that we can see from Opus that you'd like to talk us through in terms of how you constructed them and how you decided to approach it?
Yeah, let's queue up. We can actually watch the scene that I've got right here. John Malkovich is awesome.
Yeah, I think that's the moral of the story. And for those that haven't seen this project yet, he's a very mysterious musician. So this is kind of like their first introduction to this weekend. So this is a very tense scene in the film. And you can see, like, you were walking us through some of that organization process and how your AE decided to organize each camera angle, and you were able to take like that entire storytelling monologue that he was giving and really like give us like various different perspectives, people's reaction shots. I love the way that scene came together.
Yeah, that one to me, I think something we talked about earlier, Morgan, is how different types of editing can like inspire and inform your projects. I felt like with this one, I was just pulling on some of the experience I've had cutting stand-up comedy specials, where you cover your subject from multiple angles. You're trying to figure out, when do you go tight, when do you stay wide, when do you linger, when do you take the air out. And in the original version of the scene, let me, I guess, share here again. Yeah, so in the original version of this of this scene, it was actually longer. And that goes back to that refining process, where we're trying to we're trying to kind of sort through and figure out, okay, what is you say bare minimum, I think that's kind of pejorative. So yeah, but what is the essential part of the scene? You know, what is the core of it? You can actually see here where we tipped in some storyboards to kind of, you know, allow us to cut around. But yeah, basically, um, this is the first time we meet Moretti, John Malkovich's character. Our our guests, Murray Bartlett, Juliette Lewis, Io, you know, their reaction to his speech is almost more important in this moment than the speech itself. You know, obviously we're learning about Moretti, we're learning about how he knew Chuck Norris and Muhammad Ali, and you know, is a storyteller and is grandiose and all of these things. He's understated. Um, but we're also learning how, you know, Io is our way into the story. She's our protagonist. And so we're learning, how does she view and understand this experience? Juliette Lewis, Murray Bartlett's characters, who Claire and Stan, you know, they know the Moretti character. They knew him back when he was famous 30 years ago. And so they're more in a place of, you know, reverence or awe or excitement, you know, and it's showing the disparity between these two, and figuring out when to cut away, when to reveal the whole group, when to go to the levelists, which are the cult members all in blue. That's really the fun in editing, is having a scene like this where you have a mesmerizing performance from a Malkovich. You know, you have all these, I mean, just what a wealth of like takes and options, right? You know, we can look here and we can see, what line is this? So this is what he's talking about, cut into 4 tiny pieces. You know, we can look at this and we can say, oh, and just a quick aside, what I've done here is I've just made a little kind of visual split screen. This was so we could post this on Frame.io for the director to be able to kind of pull some selects on his own. I just scaled the video down, slid it left and right. But yeah, it's just digging into this and finding kind of like, what is the funniest part of it? What is the part of it that's maybe the most unsettling? That's the real fun with editing a scene like this. I guess a bit of advice is, you know, I've cut some stand-up specials. I feel like that helped me do this scene better. I don't think you should ever look down on any, I'll call it alternative editing that you might do. Like, not everything is long form editing, not everything is a feature film, but all of it will make you a better editor. Being able to, you know, music video cut style, narrative style, stand-up style, you know, all of these different things just help you learn different tools of the trade in different ways in.
Oh, totally,
Yeah.
totally. I love that. We do have some questions in the chat around organizations and reels. So, in terms of your production organization, do you have separate projects for each reel?
Mhm. Yep. So that we actually have reel 3 and reel 4 open right now. So we can look here. Um, I'm a big sucker for, you know, dating everything. I do military time. I level, iterate up with new cuts, with changes. I think it's really important. Like, I'll make this a little bit smaller. You can kind of see, we would actually, through the course of the project, have to purge these from time to time because they would get too, there'd be too many of them. But it's nice to be able to look back and be like, okay, August 19th at 2100 hours, whatever that is, I can kind of see, okay, this is where our cut was. And so, yeah, everything is kind of a distillation, right? Reels become, or string outs become selects, selects become scenes, scenes become reels, reels become the movie. And by working in different reels, another thing that allows us to do from a organization standpoint is I could be working in reel 3 and I could say to my assistant editor, hey, Riley, can you hop into reel 4 and do a temp sound pass on this scene? Or could you hop into reel 7 and find us, you know, maybe we need to do a temp visual effects of a phone comp or, you know, split screen or something. It allows us to be in the, you know, different projects at the same time and working together at the same time. It also just helps. I mean, it's more for, I would say, the colorists and the sound mixing vendors, because traditionally they would work in reels. It also just lets you be more, going back to like the offline workflow. I hate waiting. for exports. I hate waiting for renders. I just hate waiting. And by kind of keeping things compartmentalized, you're able to just expedite processes. We would do a lot of stuff when we were doing a big output where my director and I would say, watch down reel one, say thumbs up. Riley, go ahead and build that, put that in the output. He would put it into the output while we watch reel two. And then we're able to kind of just leapfrog each other and get to the end. Same with QCing, like he could QC something while we were watching the next one and doing any last tidying. So yeah, that's how we do reels, and those are each reel is its own project within the production.
Perfect. Great. And for anybody that is listening in that doesn't know what a production is, it's basically just a folder on disk that has a bunch of Premiere Pro projects that are all self-aware of each other. But it's ideal for any sort of long form editorial environment where you're collaborating with many other editors.
Yep.
And everybody has it built into Premiere Pro. It's just file, new production is how you find it. It's one of the best kept secrets we've got, but because it's not on that homepage, sometimes it's a little bit hard to find. So I always like to just give it a quick shout out. I'd be interested. I know we've got a little bit more time left. Do we have another scene where we could do another scene breakdown? This is so interesting.
We do, yeah. Do we want to play that one back?
So cool. All right, so walk us through the setup of what that scene was teeing up right there.
Of course. So yeah, so let me am I sharing?
Yep.
Oh, it's different now. I can see like the whole thing. Okay, sorry. So yeah, so that scene kind of has two parts. The first part is Ariel, Io's characters run through the compound. And then the second part is this conversation. And so this is kind of the first opportunity Ariel's gotten to have some one-on-one time with Moretti. A little bit of backstory. You find out early in the movie that Ariel's character isn't really getting the opportunities that she wants at the magazine she's working at. And so this is kind of a big opportunity for her. This is, imagine if, Prince, Bowie, or we can make it even more modern. Like, let's say Taylor Swift or Beyonce, let's say they disappeared tomorrow. And then 30 years from now, they came back with a new album. That's the scale we're dealing with. And then an unknown journalist gets invited to go interview this person, to be at this compound for this listening party. That's what's happening. And so she wants to understand the gift baskets they all got had this book, the Meditations of Level. She's already kind of spoken to some of the cult members. She's trying to understand what's going on. She goes for a jog. That's something her character does. And her character's concierge, played by Amber Midthunder Bell, follows her on the entire jog, which is kind of funny. It's one of those beats in the movie where where's my one of those beats in the movie where it's kind of surprising that somebody would run after you as you're just doing a jog on this compound. And then she has this conversation with Moretti where she's trying to get some information about the cult, about the religion. He's a little dismissive. I'm just a follower. I didn't create any of this, which is part of the mystery, part of what she's trying to figure out. And so what was fun about this is, it started with a scene that's a little bit more freeform. This run, right? If we kind of go through my selects, you can kind of see this is a similar thing, scene 30 selects. There's no line by line for this because there's no lines. But what Riley did for me was he did color code everything just based on setup. And so what you can see here is, let me mute this audio. We did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 takes, this move where we're kind of coming through this golden light, through this area where some of the levelists are working. They did a couple of different variations of that for speed, for performance. I think the last one here was ultimately my select. So I'm looking at this when the footage comes in and I'm thinking, okay, what information are we getting here? We're seeing the compound. We're getting a sense of the scale of the compound, of the cult. We're getting these kind of playful moments as, Io is such a great actress and performer, and so expressive. You know, she's looking back, kind of has this kind of like excitement. Is kind of weirded out a little bit by Belle there following her. We have some shots that are, you know, in this wide space, just showing kind of the beautiful New Mexico landscape. So all of these things are introducing at a macro level kind of the geography of this compound. You know, these things, it's a horror movie, are going to come into play later as Io's character tries to escape and tries to find, you know, freedom or reprieve from her attackers. And so I think this is something that Mag did really, really well in the film. Is, you know, just a lot of these things are kind of effortless. It's not a lot of exposition. It's just kind of showing, not telling, of yeah, what does this compound focus on? They're teaching children. Everybody in these shots is an artist of some kind. This is actually something we ended up not using. A little sneak peek there. You know, and then every movie does generally, you know, some B-roll, you know, some things. I think these were near the compound they actually filmed at. So these are elements that, you know, we might want to work into that. And then the scene, these are technically two separate scenes, but I kind of shared them as one. We can then look at the line by line of this conversation, and we can say, okay, again, these are all the different takes I have of this moment, of this line. You know, we came in, let me mute these again so I can talk. You know, we have our wide. We have kind of a two shot. We have an over the shoulder on Io. We have a clean on Io, single, over the shoulder on John, clean on John. And then this one looks like maybe they did just a little bit of a reposition, but it's still his close up. And so, yeah, went through here, pulled my favorite reads of each of these lines, made that assembly, and then, you know, sat down with my director, and it looks like these were his selects as well. And that just, to me, it helps my brain when you're trying to contain so many things at one time. Again, to have this line by line, this place I can go to. And then, yeah, we would throw that into the cut. Oh, double click the wrong thing. So yeah, if we go into, let's go to one of the old ones.
And we also had some questions on color coding. So the way that you like everything color coded, are those just the clips in the timeline, or are you color coding things in the bin as well? Or is your assistant editor Riley?
Riley is doing that. I believe it's just in the timeline. And it would never, it's not like there's a rule for the wide is always blue. It's just, he would, when he made his first string out for a scene, he would do each setup its own color. That way, when I switch over to a line by line or to anything else, I can see very quickly, like I have two of the first setup, you know, one of this, one of that, one of that.
And
Yeah.
we also had some questions on string outs. So I
Yeah.
think everyone understands what process you follow for line by line, but what exactly is a string out? Can you describe
Oh, yeah, of course.
for folks coming in?
Let's go 32, 33. So it's literally just a string out of all the footage for a specific scene front to back. And so, like, this is scene 33 where they walk to the hut. And so this was the first take of that, which is this wide. And then we have the walk back and a close steady cam in two different variations. And so it's simply all you would do is just, you know, he has pulled out like the pre-roll before action, after cut. You know, sometimes the camera rolls a little bit longer than audio or vice versa. But yeah, it's just the entirety of the takes in each setup in order. So that you can really just see kind of like at a glance how much footage you have for any given scene. You know, so this is a scene where Io is talking to the woman who gave Rachel, who gave her makeover. It's from the trailer. And this one we had, you know, 2 takes in the first setup, 3 takes or 2.5 in the second setup. Looks like 2 takes in the third setup. And then these were some specific close-ups.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, we have so many questions in the chat and we're running low on time. And I want to make sure we get to some of them because we definitely have some music fans in the chat. That's very apparent here.
Okay.
I mean, like, if you haven't checked out the movie Opus yet, you've got to check it out, especially if you're a music fan, because you can see exactly how Ernie has been able to go from music videos into features here. But what are the biggest differences between cutting music videos and cutting features? Is there a big difference? Is there a difference in how you organize or approach the editorial process?
Yeah, I think, music videos are often split into two parts. There's the performance, so that's the lip sync stuff, and then there's the narrative stuff. Or narrative choreography, basically anything that's not lip sync. And so for those projects, I like to have the lip sync stuff, sunk to the track in a multicam. But it's similar for the narrative, the non, sync moments you're going through, you're pulling selects, you're whittling it down. I think that process is true for all types of editing. The nice thing about a music video is you are kind of stuck to the track. I mean, some people will do like an interlude or they'll have, a narrative beat start something, but most of the time you are stuck to like, oh, it's 3.5 minutes long and this is the beat and this is where, we should cut. And this is, there's a structure to it for you. With narrative, it's kind of whatever you want it to be. These scenes, for example, the scene of Io running there, I had enough footage. I could have made that 15 minutes long. I don't think anybody's going to want to sit and watch Io run around that compound for 15 minutes in a movie. And I'd probably get some notes from somebody being like, hey, let's trim that up. But what music video editing, I think, teaches is rhythm and pace and efficiency. A lot of what you need to do in a music video is be quick. You need to tell a story in 3 minutes. You need to find the heart of a moment efficiently and quickly and not let that linger too much. I often will tell my directors if I'm hopping on to do a music video project with them, like, think about how long your shots are. If it's a 3-minute song, we will literally probably never use a 35-second dolly shot unless it's very intentional and that's the start of the video or that's a pause in the middle. Like, unless it's specific, This Is American is an example of that, which is all long takes. Most of the time you're going to want to cut to the beat every 5 seconds, every 3 seconds. And so think about those things when you shoot. And yeah, I think it just, a big thing about editing that I don't know if we've talked about yet, but it's that bedside manner thing. Music videos let you kind of live the life of a project quickly, and kind of level up your game at, talking to clients, managing expectations, doing all of the things that are editing that aren't physically editing within Premiere, and you get on a project. Like, I'm about to start some stuff for some people I can't name, but Sunday I'm going to go into the office. I'm going to have some footage. I'm going to get to have the creative conversations. What's the goals? What's the storyboards? What do you guys end up shooting? What do you end up not shooting? Like, a lot of times on a music video, they won't get something that was in the treatment. And so it's, how do you have that conversation with the director post their shoot where you get the download of information and understand what they're trying to achieve and where they're worried that maybe they need a creative solve for. It allows you to have all of those conversations and experiences in a very truncated time. Like, a music video edit is very rarely longer than 2 weeks. And so, yeah, it just helps it's like a faster version of a thing.
Well, there was also some questions on how involved are the artists in that music video process. Is it with something like Renaissance? Was that something where you had even more stakeholders to consider with the artist as well? How does that dynamic work?
It varies. It varies from artist to artist. I would say you're always going to have at least at least 3 competing stakeholders in a music video. You have the director, production company. That's the people that were hired on to make the thing. You have the label itself, which is, if it's a major label, if it's Universal or Sony, whatever, like, they have their own plan, goals, whatever, for for the project, right? They're thinking, okay, how are we releasing this music video to help get the album sales or get the ticket sales for the concert tour or whatever. And then you have the artist and the artist management, which, you know, they're maintaining the artist image. They're thinking about, you know, is this the right move creatively? Like, do we really need that brand sponsorship? Whatever it is, right? And so you're kind of in the middle of three very powerful, distinct, different creative goals, voices, opinions. And your job is to navigate, you know, those three and honor the project, do the service to, you know, make the project the best thing it can be, but then also get buy-in and excitement from everybody on board.
We have another question in the chat, which is, are there any sort of common mistakes on set that you often see that are impacting the way you do post?
Common mistakes. I will say the biggest thing, music videos specifically, but also narrative, that I think is incredibly helpful: scratch audio on your camera.
Yes.
The higher end cinema cameras, the Alexas, the Venices, they do not have a built-in microphone. If you're shooting on an FX3 or a mirrorless, those have a built-in microphone, but the higher end stuff doesn't. And what'll happen is I'll get footage from a music video that was a crazy 18-hour shoot day. They had no time for slates. They're running and gunning and getting all this stuff. And then I'm looking at it and they had the artist do a specific 8-second part of the song 12 times in a row, but they changed where the artist started each time. It's one take and I have no audio. And so now instead of editing, I'm going to spend the next 3 hours looking through lip sync, figuring out what line it is in the song to sync it. If you can have scratch audio, I can just auto sync to audio in Premiere, and it's 2 seconds and it's done. And it also lets me, the editor, hear the conversations that are happening. Oftentimes on music videos or smaller projects, comedy, shorts, commercials, whatever, there's not a scripty, you know, Opus was a union feature. So we had script supervisor Anastasia. She was amazing. You know, I can go to her notes and I can say, okay, they reset because of this, right? Like the director didn't like the look of the drink. And so they, whatever. But on a music video, I don't get a script report. I don't get those notes. And so if I have scratch audio, I can listen and watch and I can hear the label come in and say, oh, she can't do that because of X. Or I can hear the artist management come in and say, we really like this. You know, I can hear those things and it just really helps the process go quicker.
All right. Well, there were some other questions around generally, like if you had to give like an estimate, how many edits are you submitting over the course of that 2-week post process for music videos? Is this something where you're submitting cuts for review every day, every couple days? What does that look like?
I'll answer in two different ways, or I'll give two thoughts here. One is it's usually, I'd say by the time I go from like an editor's cut all the way to the locked cut on a music video, it's probably between 10 and 20 revisions. And that sounds like a lot, and it is. I think a big thing with music videos to go into them is to go in with the mentality that like, this is not the job that's going to pay me the money that's going to set me up for life. This is the job that's going to allow me to be creative. It's going to open doors. You know, a lot of commercial ad agency people are watching music videos. That's where they go for the cool stuff to then steal it and distill it into their, I don't want to talk crap about any brand, but like we're going to take the cool thing and now we're going to water it down. And that's where you make your money, in the commercials. But yeah, I think it's, you know, I like to say anytime I take on a project, is it going to move me forward in my career? Is it going to be creatively fulfilling? And is it going to pay me? You know, if it's two of those things, I'll really consider. If it's three, I'll definitely do it. If it's one, I might pass on it. If it's zero, I'm definitely not doing it. And with music videos, I think it's important to remember that like at the end of the day, you are investing in a label liking your work and wanting to work with you again, an artist liking your work and wanting to work again, and a director and a production company. And each of those things are a different seed you can plant that's going to open doors, grow into opportunities. And so, yeah, when you hear 20 revisions on a music video, that sounds awful, but I think it's going into it knowing that that's what it's going to be and that's how it's going to be. But then also, this is the wrinkle: set boundaries. You know, I think it's important to say, okay, we're going to pay you X number of dollars flat for a music video edit. Say, great, I will do that for the next 2 weeks. But if we go over those 2 weeks, then it'll need to be an additional fee. It's like having those boundaries that you can operate within gives you the confidence to not feel like you're in this gray zone where it's like, if I don't accommodate this person, well, now I'm going to blow up this relationship. It's just like, have those conversations early, be direct. And then once you're in the space, don't sweat it. Don't sweat the 20 revisions.
Good words to live by. Don't sweat the 20 revisions. Well, we're almost at time here, and we've got a lot of folks that are just about to start out. So we do have some questions around, aside from being motivated and being a self-starter, what do you often look for in assistant editors?
That's I think it's you need to know the software. I think it's hard to hop into these somewhat high pressure situations and then to feel like, oh, that person doesn't know, how to do something. But I'm also a big proponent of, like, if you don't know how to do it, tap into your resources, use your Google and YouTube. And early on in my career, we had a cohort of a bunch of assistant editors who we would just like text each other, like, how do you do this? What is that? How does that work? So like, know the software, know how to do things, and then know what you don't know. There's things I don't know how to do, so I can figure it out. I can take initiative. And then I think it's also just like vibe and taste, which I know is not a like solid prescriptive answer, but I think going back to that fun thing, it's, we're all human. We're going to come into the edit bay some days and maybe something sad happened in our lives or something bad, happened over the weekend. It's, people who are able to navigate those things with grace and with understanding and empathy. And just, I think it's like being a human and treating people with respect and being nice. I would never work with, and I would never want to work for somebody who is, abusive or manipulative or not truthful in their word or how they approach things. Those things I think translate into this work. And the people that I've, in my life that I look up to and aspire to be like, that's how they work. And they continue to work, I think, because of it. And then, it's demeanor, vibe, approach, initiative, understanding of the stuff. And then I think the final thing is just kind of taste. Different people have different tastes, and it's not a judgment. I may like something that this person thinks is really corny or cringy, or this other thing may be too much of that for me, and that's totally fine. Those differences are okay. I think it's important though, like when you have conversations for potential jobs, as an editor, you're interviewing the director too, right? As an assistant editor, you're interviewing the editor. Is this the type of person who sees the world that I do? Not that we all have to see it exactly the same way, but I do think it's like important to vet and to ask questions and to, like a big thing I like to ask directors is, what do you expect from me in terms of, do you want me like do you want us to be in the edit bay together 24/7? Do you want me to work on my own and then present something to you? I think it's important to ask these questions of like how people like to work and how they handle conflict and how they handle, like, hey, if we totally disagree on something, how should we handle that? Have that conversation when it's just a hypothetical and it's not something that you just spent 12 hours on and are super tired and drained, but like proud of. And now somebody's saying, we're not going to use that at all. It's like, have the conversation when it's easy. And then you'll kind of know when it gets hard, how to walk through it.
I love that. I love that. I mean, I feel like that should be the case for any job, period.
Yeah, totally.
I always like to end a lot of our editor interviews with the $1 million question, which is, with everybody listening in, just starting out, What skills do you think are the absolute most important to succeed? We've heard about bedside manner.
Mhm.
We've heard about setting boundaries, finding the right people to work with that bring out the best in your work. But do you have any closing thoughts, and do you have any advice for how to put yourself out there and start getting those first jobs just out of film school?
I think the most succinct way I can put that, and it's advice I have to give myself daily. I do a little directing and aspire to do other parts of this job and be a filmmaker in a more holistic way. And the most succinct version of like, if you want to be an editor, be an editor. It's just that. And I know that's kind of diminutive or reductive or something, or hocus pocus, but I think really at the end of the day, you can learn Premiere inside and out. You can read every book, but what's the Oppenheimer quote? It's like theory can only take you so far. You're not really going to know, how to navigate, let's say hypothetically somebody messes with your credit on a project. Or let's say hypothetically, your server breaks down and you lose all the footage. Whatever it is, it's like you're not going to learn how to do these things until you do them. And in today's day and age, the cool thing about this is like you can go start cutting stuff tomorrow, right? Like there is more content made now than ever before. There's the more ability to make content now than ever before. When I have coffees with people who are looking to like, get into the industry or what's the move, I always say just like, what are you most passionate about? If you love music videos and you want to edit music videos, the first thing I would do tomorrow is look up every single music video that you love and figure out who directed it and who produced it, what production company. I would then reach out to those people in a tactful, nice way. Don't be demanding. Don't hit them up every Thursday at 6 a.m. But like let people know what you want and pursue it. And you're going to get 1,000 rejections. But my therapist has this really cool trick, and I've just been using it nonstop the last couple of months. Treat those rejections like another thing on your to-do list. And if you had to if I could promise you right now, 25 failures and you will have the job you want, how quickly would you get through those 25 failures? Or rejections or feelings of anxiety or whatever it is. And so my advice is just, if you want to edit, find a way to edit, find a short film from a friend, a classmate, whatever, go cut it for them. Reach out to a local business that needs social content for their hibachi grill, whatever it is, like find a way to cut things, because in doing that, you will unlock and open doors. You don't need an agent or a manager at this point if you're just getting started, because it's like an agent or a manager is like having a bicycle. I can go further with my bicycle, but that bicycle is not going to go anywhere without me pedaling it. And really that's where you're at, is you're at the start of it. And the cool thing about it is every filmmaker you meet, every editor was where you are right now at some point. And
Comforting. I like
and
that.
yeah, and I honestly think like I'm the recipient of blessings and support and empowerment and opportunities. I love giving those to people. The editors that I'm friends with love giving those to people. Like, reach out to the people that inspire you. Reach out to the people you want to work with. And yeah, just do the thing that you want to do, and don't wait for permission to do it.
If you wanna edit. I think we have a new, bumper sticker slogan that we're gonna start handing out, right?
Yeah.
Well, I can't thank you enough, Ernie, spending your Friday morning with us. Your
Yeah.
work is a total inspiration to everybody
Thank
in the
you.
chat. Thank you so much again for inspiring us.